Today we've got a wild revenge story that resulted ultimately in a bunch of crushed taco shells and tostadas. We'll get into that story in just a bit, but first, a drive-thru lesson in patience. Last night, I was at the McDonald's drive-thru and the lady behind me honked her horn and made an obscene gesture because I was taking too long to place my order. So I paid for her food. When she got to the cashier, she told them that I had paid for her meal and she felt embarrassed. When I got to the second window to pick up my food, I showed them both receipts, so I ended up taking her food too. I paid for it, and now it's mine. Now she has to get back in line. Let's see if she learns from this. Okay, I've got to be honest here, I've seen this meme posted many a time before, and what I was going to say is actually what Emily 4571962 was about to say, so let's jump down and see what they post. What possible gain do you hope to achieve from copying someone else's little backstory and posting it on Reddit as if it's your own? Seriously, I want to understand the hopelessly broken psychology behind this. Also, hello, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these pro-revenge videos, it would be so cool, so awesome if you dropped a like or a comment down below if you're listening to our podcast. That being said, our next story is, gave my ex a surprise when I left unexpectedly. My ex and I were planning on separating. It was a toxic relationship. He was a controlling narcissist, and I had been under his thumb for far too long. I was in counseling, and my therapist and I mapped out the best way for me to get out, although the details of the plan were my idea. I got a better paying job. I opened my own bank account. That was a huge fight, and I figured out where to go. He knew I was leaving, and he even went through the house and marked all of the things that were his that I couldn't take with me, which was basically everything we purchased throughout our 13 years together. I was only allowed to take the items that I came with when we moved in together. He planned to take the day off from work on a particular Saturday and would be there to supervise my move to ensure that I only took what he approved. That's where my plan began. The Saturday before his planned date, I scheduled to move after he left for work. He worked long days, so I knew I could pack and leave before he returned. About an hour after he left, my friends and family showed up with boxes and tape and a moving truck. I parked it out back so my neighbors didn't see it. In less than 4 hours, all my belongings were packed and on the truck, and I pretty much stuck to his rules because I didn't want reminders of our life and my future. Before I left in the truck, I went through and grabbed every single towel, washcloth, sheet, toilet paper, paper towel, napkin, and tissue. I took anything and everything that he could wipe his butt or his nose with, and I took the carpet runner that was at the front door, leaving the tape that secured it to the floor. That way, he knew as soon as he walked in that I was gone. Imagine coming home from work after a long day, expecting one thing and finding another, and then not having a single tissue or toilet paper to use. My best revenge was building a happy new life, but that day made me feel so good. Edit, for those who care, yes, actually diagnosed. We were originally in therapy together. I forgot to add that he deemed the bed as his, so I couldn't take it, but he never mentioned the mattress and box spring, which I also took. Okay, so this revenge goes from like a 5 to a clean, perfect 10 if ex-husband, every day when he comes home from work or wherever he arrives to the house from, if he just takes like a massive dump every day. And the reason you did that is because you know he's gonna rush upstairs, run into the bathroom, drop a deuce, and then just have no way other than his hands and his clothes to wipe himself. That would be funny. That would be really funny, actually. Importance Ladder 6140 responded, light bulbs. Taking light bulbs is the biggest FU ever. We sold a house 15 years ago to the most annoying, arrogant, entitled people. We got the last laugh. Amstroid responded, I did it in the same situation. People who bought my house were friendly until the deed was signed, and they turned into arrogant, entitled a-holes. So I changed all my LED bulbs to nearly burned out halogen ones, took the new plants from the garden, every shelf and their plugs out the wall, everything that I could take with me without destroying something went with me. Our next story is, my teacher thought they knew my name better than me. This was years ago now when I was in secondary school, around 15 years old. We used to have form in the morning where the teacher would take the register and let you know about anything going on in school before you went to your other classes. My form tutor was a miserable old woman that was a renowned arsehole. There were several stories I could tell about her, but this one is the only time I got the better of her. My parents named me a shortened version of a posh-sounding name. For the sake of the story, let's say they called me Alex, which is short for Alexander. Whenever this woman would call my name, she would always use Alexander. I brought up to her that it was not my name multiple times and asked her to please call me Alex, as that's what my parents called me. She would always get angry and tell me, "Don't be stupid, no one is named Alex, your name is Alexander. Alex is just what you want to be called." No matter how much I insisted, she refused. At one point, she gave me a detention for asking her to call me my correct name. The school called to let my parents know I had been given a detention for arguing with my teacher. When I told my parents I was supposed to have a detention for asking my teacher to call me the right name, they were not happy. So they gave me a trump card to use against her, my birth certificate. The next day, when she called my name, I once again told her that wasn't my name. She threatened me with another detention, so I pulled out the birth certificate, put it down on her desk, and said, "My birth certificate says my name is Alex, so that's what you will call me. Thanks." The look on her face was priceless. She started calling me my actual name for the rest of the time I was in her class. You know, this is rare. Typically, names like that are just nicknames, but I myself have also encountered people that are actually legally named the quote-unquote nickname and not the full extended version. So, bottom line, just call people what they ask you to call them. I mean, don't try to read between the lines. Small Earth 8622 responded, "Something similar happened to me in high school, grade 9. I swear the teacher didn't like me because she would do this all the time. Every other morning or so for weeks, she would have the attendance sheet in her hands reading and calling out students' names and would still call me a different name entirely by the time she got to mine. Her excuse was that I, quote, looked like another girl who had that name that she taught previously. The last time she did it, I didn't bother responding after hearing the wrong name, because after a while I knew when my name would come up in the attendance sheet. When she would do that, I would hear the class whispering, 'Who's that? Who's April?' And then she calls me out after looking over the room saying, 'Oh, there you are.' And I would tell her every time, 'My name is Natasha, not April,' fake names, with the deadliest stare. I would just continue to ignore her whenever she would mistake my name, even though it was written on the piece of paper in her hands. Eventually, she stopped, but I could tell she still wanted to call me by the other name, because she would stutter her words before calling me. It still gets me mad to this day." Peanut083 responded, "Dang, I'm a teacher who does day-to-day casual work and occasionally call the kid the wrong name because my mind has made some weird association between them and some other kid I taught like 3 years previously. But I've never straight up called a kid the wrong name when I have the role right in front of me. I might mess up the pronunciation if there's some ambiguity, but I've never straight up called out the wrong name, except that one time I called out a kid's dead name because their parent won't let them change it on the roll. The thing is that I knew the name the kid goes by and have always subbed their legal name for the name they go by previously. On this particular day, I went, dead name, wait a sec, that's not your name, and glanced up to find the poor kid death staring me. I immediately apologized and called out the name they go by. I should add that I'm in Australia, so I'm not going to lose my job over calling a trans/non-binary kid by their preferred name and pronouns. I also always apologize to the kid when I realize I've called them by the wrong name and tell them to keep correcting me until my dopey brain finally gets the memo that they are, in fact, not the person I taught 3 years ago. Our next story is, date ended in an unexpected way. Years ago, I went on a date with a girl I met on Match.com. We had been messaging back and forth for a good few days and we were getting on great. Had a phone call or two thrown in there as well. She seemed laid back, fun, and pretty easy to talk to. After about 5 days of messaging back and forth, we arranged to meet up in a city for our first face-to-face date. As we had been getting on so well, we decided to go for a meal at a nice restaurant, rather than the coffee dates that I'd been trying as fat with other potential matches. So I booked the table, long before COVID, so no credit card taken, and we met up at the restaurant. I got a feeling early on that I maybe didn't meet her expectations looks-wise. She seemed a little somber at the start of the date, but we soldiered on and she seemed to relax and we started to have fun, or so I thought. She was pouring the wine into herself all through the meal. I thought she was nervous, but she got herself a bit drunk. After the main course, she excused herself to the toilet. Less than a minute later, I got a text from her in the bathroom. "This date is rubbish, he's brutally ugly, and I'm not having fun. Can you call me in about 5 minutes and I'll pretend there's an emergency?" She had clearly not meant to send this to me, but in her drunken state had just started typing on the last message she sent. She had messaged me to say she was on her way before the date started. I beckoned the waiter over as I pulled my coat on and told her, "My wife has gone to the bathroom and I've just had a call from work. there's an emergency I have to deal with. She has the credit card. She'll square up the bill. I walked out and didn't look back. Blocked her number as well. Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that you can handle it. One is certainly just, footing her with the bill and walking right out of there. Another is to allow her to come back, and then you kind of turn the same table right back on her. In a couple of minutes, you fake like you have a phone call, and you're like, oh, I've got an emergency, sorry, I'm out. But also, like, if you guys met on a dating website, how does she just all of a sudden think that you're ugly? Clearly, she's seen your picture before, right? And you've talked, and I don't know, that's just kind of weird to me, but I don't do online dating stuff, so I might be missing something. Tickle Liberal Granny responded, my SO and I met online. Our first face-to-face meetup was at a mall, and I brought a friend. We just walked around and chatted while my friend window shopped, then went to lunch at a local Mexican restaurant. The following weekend, he bought me an Amtrak ticket to visit him. I rented a room a little over an hour away. His reasoning for the train was so I could just relax and read my latest Robert Jordan instead of fight traffic. We did this every weekend for about 6 months. We've now been living together quite happily for coming up on 7 years. Our next story is, want to get to school on time? Clean the snow off the windows. Just this morning, we had a few centimeters of snow. It's cold here, like -8 degrees Celsius cold. Sent Kid 1, teenager, out to start the car a few minutes before we left. Kid 2, also a teenager, is always just in time for everything. In fact, they've made an exact science of it. 1 and 2 normally get along real well. 1 and 2 were out sitting in the car with the heated seat set to hot. I walk out of the house and look at the car and all the windows are snow-covered. I open the driver's door, look in to see them with their heads down and buried in their phones. I state, you couldn't clear the snow from the car? I tuned the gas lighting out, but as I closed the driver's door, stood outside for a second to take a breath of cold, crisp air, and then opened the back door to search for the snow brush and scraper. I wonder which one will be better this morning, I thought to myself. The scraper was my choice. I cleared the side windows best I could, but that small scraper just wasn't cutting it. Reached in, grabbed the long brush, and heard, as I was closing the door, we're going to be lit. I decided the long brush was the right choice after redoing the side windows. I meticulously cleaned the front window, lifted the wipers, and made sure to get every bit of snow out from underneath. Did the same for the back window. Cleaned the headlight, the 2 rear lights, and then the other headlight. Cleared the license plate off, cleared the hood next. I looked at the roof and decided to clear that too. Just my luck, I pushed the snow that was on the roof down onto the front of the window. Being safe is no chump job. I again cleaned the front window to the point that there was not a snowflake left on it. As I walked to the back door, I noticed a buildup of ice on the door handles. I did a good job cleaning all 4 of them as well. The normal 12-minute drive took us 16 because the roads were a bit slushy. I went a little below the speed limit. After all, I was transporting special cargo. The only noise I heard were the sighs from Kid 2. We made it to school, they jumped out, I told them I loved them and to have a great day. Got a return I love you too from both, and as Kid 2's door was closing, I heard them say to Kid 1, next time clean the freaking windows when you get out to start the car. I chuckled, went for a coffee and then a haircut, neither of which I had to be at any certain time. Great way to teach a lesson and accountability to kids, so I don't see anything wrong with this. Good job. Papa T69 responded, shut car off and remove the keys. Tell them to come get you when the car is cleaned off. Go inside, have a seat, and wait for them to come get you. Repeat as needed in the future. Our next story is, embarrassed my friend with his laptop. My friend is computer illiterate. How badly? He complains when I ask him to email me a link to something, because he doesn't know you can copy and paste a URL. He types each character of the URL out in the email. Anyway, he bought a rather nice laptop from a pawn shop he used to work at. He told me once that if someone wants to pawn a computer, they have to turn it on and log into it with the username to prove it's theirs. And whenever he's short of cash, off he goes to the pawn shop. He'd been at this particular one so often he got a job there. On all his past computers, he'd gotten viruses and hijackers from going to adult websites, so he asked me if I could wipe the hard drive, which his shop never did when buying computers, and install a firewall, antivirus, keylogger detector, anti-malware, and other useful programs that he liked. I made that laptop bulletproof, added anti-adware, LibreOffice, photo editing programs, video editing software, etc. It took some time getting it just right. I even imaged the drive, cleaned it, and ran some benchmark tests. The day I was to return it to him, he mentioned that he was hard up for some money. And knowing him as I did, he was most likely going to pawn that laptop I spent a lot of time getting ready for him. So the day I returned it, I added a login avatar and desktop background to embarrass him. I went to his house with it, and he suggested we go out for a cheap lunch. He drove and subtly put the laptop in the seat behind him without even turning it on. Not surprisingly, our first stop was the pawn shop. He asked me to wait while he went inside with the laptop, and I could see the intake counter from the car. He placed the laptop on the counter, and the worker asked him to turn it on and log on. The look on his face was well worth the effort, as the avatar was a giant dildo and the desktop wallpaper was two naked gay guys holding each other and kissing. There was also an empty folder named Hot Gay German Porn on the desktop. He looked out at the car and shot me the most evil look, but I just laughed my butt off and gave him a thumbs up. His former coworkers were standing there smirking, and he looked quite embarrassed. I was never asked to work on his computers again. Harmless in the grand scheme of things. The only 3 people that know about this are the 2 friends and the pawn shop guy, so, whatever. If you're into that or not, who cares? It's not your computer anymore. You pawned it off, right? Ill Industry 6452 responded, "Sounds like he deserved it when he was planning to pawn a computer you spent so much time and trouble fixing for him." Our next story is Petty Against My Replacement. I'm working for a big company where it's easy to be shifted around if someone higher up doesn't like working with you for whatever reason. So I got moved to another team without any explanation except it doesn't seem to be working between you and your boss, from even higher up in the chain. I've been working here for 17 years in various positions, so I know pretty much everyone. My replacement, however, is new to the company and never worked in my field. He only did a small re-employment course. Somehow, this earned him a higher position with me, with higher benefits. This dude never did anything wrong to me, but he keeps asking me how to do his job. A job I apparently wasn't doing very well, so I'm just stonewalling him. I could make this guy's life so easy, or I can keep telling him to ask his boss. I know I'm petty here, as I keep having to think about what to say so that I don't cross the line towards insubordination. If they can't at least grant you the dignity of an explanation as to why the change happened, I don't see anything wrong with what you're doing. Just feign ignorance. Yeah, talk to your boss. I don't know. West Coast 1313 responded, "Unless it's your job to train them, telling them to ask their boss sounds perfectly acceptable. Just say you don't want to give them bad instructions." Our next story is University Teacher Does Petty Revenge to the Class. Biology undergrad students versus animal physiology teacher going like low-key feud. I must give you some context beforehand, so you can understand the story. Unfortunately, this may be boring. There's a low-key disliking between the biology students and the different teachers of animal physiology. Well, yes, the topic is difficult, but it's far from being the sole reason. Teachers and professors of it are often disliked not only because of the topic difficulty, but mostly because most of them, not all though, are quite dickheads towards the students, significantly more than other professors. At our university, for all fields, tutorial classes and lab work classes have mandatory attendance, but lectures do not. So attendance to lectures is quite a good measurement of a given professor's quality of teaching. For example, one of our biochemistry professors has insanely high attendance to his lectures, despite the topic being complex and demanding hard work. There are various professors that are really good and beloved by the students, but their lectures are boring, so they have low attendance rates. They, however, do great tutorials. This is true not only for biology, but also other fields. For example, mathematics students prefer to attend one professor's lecture than the exact same lecture, but provided by another one. Professors and teachers who have very low attendance rates are, understandably, upset by the students not coming, and they do so for understandable reasons. Immunology lectures have average attendance rates, despite the topic being as much complex and difficult as animal physiology, so it's not only because the topic is difficult. I highlight this since both animal physiology and immunology are taught at a much higher level than in other universities. As undergraduates, we get taught things that usually are taught to graduate students elsewhere. So once all that context is posed, we may begin the crispy part. On Tuesday morning, there is a physiology lecture, extremely low attendance, more than usual. Then, the same evening, 6:30 p.m., so after the end of the teaching day when everyone has gone home, we receive an email from our current physiology teacher. By Thursday morning, for the tutorial, we have to make groups and analyze a given figure, issued from a scientific paper, and rehearse it so we may present it in front of the classroom. This type of work is usually done not on such short notice. We usually do the groups in class, right after being announced the work we must do. Then we have a couple of days, from 3 to 5, to do this kind of work for the following tutorial. But here we have to do all this in one day and evening. So yeah, our professor decided to do us dirty per retaliation for getting deserved low attendance to his lecture the same morning. It's amazing in college, university, how drastically different your collegiate experience can be strictly depending on which professors you get. You can take the exact same classes or subjects themselves, but the prof can just make or break the entire experience. And honestly, from their perspective, if a student doesn't come to class, but they study on their own time and they pass all your exams, who cares? Honestly, who cares? It's a better reflection on you if you have more students pass. So I don't know, that's just kind of tacky. Our Jack151 responded, "In college, my history teacher would have a review the day before his midterm and final exams. I finished the course and sold my book and notes to a guy for the next semester. He told me that when they had his final exam review, hardly anyone participated in the review, which ticked off the teacher. So he said that since they were not participating, they must know everything. So he did not do his keyword review, closed up his books, and said he would see them all tomorrow for the exam. Only 2 people passed the exam with a grade higher than a C. The guy I sold my book and notes to, and his friend who sat beside him and studied with him." Our next story is, "Don't clean the kitchen? Guess supper will be very late then. I have teenagers and a hubby who works from home. I work a demanding job with fairly long hours, but I don't mind cooking when I get back as I enjoy it and can whip up a meal in under 20 minutes if I need to. So the deal is, I'll cook and hubby and kids get cleanup duty. The problem is that they're all extremely messy and aren't at all bothered by a dirty, messy kitchen, whereas a dirty kitchen is the one thing that really upsets me. So after a long, hard day at work, I'd get back to a filthy, dirty kitchen and have to clean it before I could start cooking. I got tired of nagging and screaming. It just elevated my stress levels. So I would get some food at work, arrive home, sit on the couch and read my book. After a while, someone would ask what was for supper. I would say, I don't know, I can't really do much in a dirty kitchen, and carry on reading my book. I would not end up cooking that evening as it got too late, and everyone else would have to have cheese on toast, much to their disgust. Now when I get home, the kitchen is spotless and the dishwasher on. Problem solved. I'm not gonna lie, I would do the exact same thing. Quid pro quo, right? It shouldn't be a quid pro quo situation, you should want to not live in a pigsty and kind of clean up after yourself, but hey, if that's what it takes to get dinner on the plate for you, then yeah, clean your dishes, clean your kitchen. And if not, cheese on toast. That sounds awful. So perfect, right? Brandon Bolt responded, "Consequences for non-action. Why yell and scream when you can read a book? You must be my sister from another mother." Our next story is, "I crushed the hard taco shells and tostadas in the store that fired me for an immutable characteristic." If you don't want your hard taco shells and tostadas crushed, I recommend 2 things. First, don't have them out in the open where my tall child, or, more aptly, any disgruntled ex-employee can crunch them all in under a minute with minimal effort. Second, I recommend not creating any such disgruntled employees by indiscriminately firing people for immutable characteristics. I have a lisp which has made my life very unpleasant, though I've learned to live with it and only notice it now when some toddler on the bus points and laughs at me when I'm simply minding my own business, talking on the phone. In in-person meetings, prefer to speak only when necessary, and let my body language do some heavy lifting. This was the case when I worked at the grocery store and a customer would come up to me with a question. If they were asking where something was and I was at a distance where I could point out their desired item, that's what I would do. If they followed up and asked for an aisle number and that number was 10 or less, I would indicate with my fingers. If they didn't leave me alone after that, then I would use my words. Usually, when they heard how difficult it is for me to get some of my words out, they seemed to understand why I communicate like this. I would say 90% of customers were unbothered or had empathy for my situation, but the 10% who were not were the types to complain to management. When I had to have a talk with the boss man, I made it clear I wasn't changing my ways. I printed out literature on lists for them to read through, which they ignored. Instead, they let me go. So, every Tuesday I go into their store and crush the hard taco shells and tostadas. It's petty, but over time it will cost them more than them firing cost me. And when corporate gives them the call and tells them their balance sheet is weak and demands an explanation, I hope they know this, and all could have been avoided had they just respected the Lisp. Okay, so OP, I understand the frustration. You are climbing a slippery slope here, though. Destruction of store property is a crime. That's really not something that you probably want to be admitting to on Reddit, and certainly not something that you want to do every Tuesday or however often it was. So, sucks that you're kind of, ostracized and bullied, certainly, but maybe find a different way to exact your revenge. Just a tip. Gokavefi responded, I've had a Lisp my entire life. I was bullied as a kid, and it affected me into my teen years via embarrassment anytime I had to speak. But as an adult, I've learned people truly don't care. I mean this in no offensive way, but it sounds like a little therapy could help you cope with the Lisp. Because I assure you, it's not a big deal in the real world to others. But I know it's hard to let go of the embarrassment from likely years of being bullied as a kid. It just sucks you're taking it out on people, customers, that have nothing to do with the reason why you're so angry at your employer. You're making people have to make multiple trips to the store for no reason, or just losing the money from the damaged product, because some people travel far to shop at grocery stores, and won't deem it worth it to drive back for $4 in shells. Instead, they just lost out on dinner for a night. I know I was pretty ticked when I was halfway through cooking taco meat and prepping veggies just to find half my shells were broken. You're guiding your anger towards the wrong people. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to go through your life just never speaking. So do what you need to do to feel better about your Lisp. I haven't suggested speech therapy because I assume you've been through all that, as I have. I'm not sure this is petty revenge, as you're affecting customers more than the store. And with all that being said, guys, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give a like and drop a comment down below, and if you want to check out any of our other videos, click the video on the right. With that being said, I'll see you all next time.